It's sort of happening in every moment of our lives. Even sitting here now, I was quite comfortable when I started off, but now the cushions slid down a bit and I'm just feeling physically a bit sort of, you know, so we can notice it in all areas of our life. If I see something on social media and it's lovely, which I have quite often, I feel really happy. So I get usually a 2-second thing, you know, when you see a cat on a scooter or somebody posts something really funny, like a dog chasing a squirrel or something, and then it rolls over and you think, oh, that's really funny. It gives me a little bit of pleasure, usually a couple of seconds. Sometimes I'll forward it on to somebody else. But otherwise, sometimes I can see some really negative stuff online as well. Really heavy stuff, really dark stuff. And it's interesting again how my mind can be drawn. You know, 1 minute laughing at a dog with a stick that someone's posted, and in another way I can see something really horrible, and straight away, you know, that has an effect on my mental states as well. So the worldly winds or worldly concerns are blowing around all the time. And they don't have to be big things, and sometimes we don't even notice them. They just catch us off guard. Yeah. So our external conditions, what we see, hear, taste, touch, can have effects on our mood, our day, and our relationships with others, and more importantly, our environments. And people talk about guarding the gates to the senses. Well, I sometimes think like that, and other times I think, no, let it all flow in. But it's how we manage it, it's how we sort of view it, what we do with it, how we work with it. There's 2 ways of looking at it, really. This isn't a bad thing, because sometimes when we see things that are quite negative that cause us pain, we can do something about it when we notice that. But sticky attachment to these images is not great. It's not great for our minds. We just replay them over and over and over. So sometimes we'll see something particularly relevant at the moment. We've got the COVID-19 virus. We've got some people behaving responsibly, some maybe not. We've got rioting, you know, and sometimes that can cause a lot of pain to see that. But also sometimes that can be something that we can turn around and think, well, actually, we can do something about it. You know, we can help with that. But it isn't really helpful for our minds just to keep churning it over and over again, keep watching and replaying the same thing. Because in a way it can cause pain, and sometimes we can even get pleasure from it. You know, sometimes people can have something to chat about, something to talk about, this week's news. So as well as the world around us, we're now often living online, and we can become pursuers of happiness and get quick fixes. Or, as I say, we can become enmeshed in the dark side of life. And I think we've all got tendencies that sway this way and that. So there's things blowing around us and we sort of have tendencies to go with them. I know that I do sometimes. So it's good to become aware of how external conditions can affect our internal world, our internal minds, and how our internal world can view our external world. So both worlds are interconnected in a way. What's going on outside of the mind and what's going on inside our mind, how we react, how we respond to unpleasant stimuli. Both worlds are able to affect how we live our lives and our choices and our beliefs. So just a light example of online craving and irritation, talking about pleasure and pain. Sometimes I go on eBay and it gives me a bit of pleasure. You know, if I start to win something, I put a bid on something, you know, I think, oh, it's exciting. And if I win it, I get a small amount of joy. There's some kind of like, oh, I've won something, you know, it's going to make my life complete. This t-shirt or, you know, this pair of old trainers, I've got them, great, it's a bargain. And if I don't win the bid, sometimes I can feel slightly irritable, even to the unseen person who's actually won the bid, who I don't even know where they live or who they are. I think, good luck with those then. I wanted those, but I hope they, you know, I hope they fit you, sort of thing. It's ridiculous. And in a way, it's sort of just pursuing pleasure in a way, and then when I don't get it, I get a mild irritation. It doesn't last long, you'll be pleased to know. The other day, I was looking at a teapot. I feel slightly embarrassed sharing this with you, but let's just go for it. So I was looking at this teapot on eBay, and I really wanted it because it was cheap. And I thought, okay, I won't put a bid on straight away. My partner said, get a bid on now, get a bid on now. I said, no, I'll leave it till the end. Anyway, a few hours later, I was in the supermarket, and I just realised that the bid was coming to an end in the middle of the supermarket. So I checked my phone, and somebody'd won it. And not only that, they'd won it for a very cheap price. And just in that moment, in the supermarket with my partner, I was really grumpy. I felt really quite peed off. And he was like, they've won that teapot. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And, you know, my partner was like, well, don't get grumpy about it. You can get one. It's just be a bit more expensive. And I was like, yeah, but that was my teapot. I was going to bid for that teapot. Anyway, it just shows how we can get. And I'm sure if we could unmute you, we'd all have our own examples of a mild irritation that causes, in a way, pain, discomfort, irritation, a little bit of anger, anything that feels a bit spiky, like we're sitting on drawing pins, in a way is unpleasant. Yeah, and that's just a mild thing. So I haven't got time to go into bigger stuff tonight. So this is just an example, but as a Buddhist practitioner, how do we work with this blustery process, your own process of losing your own teapot, whatever that symbolises? It could be a friend, it could be health, it could be anything, you know, that causes pain or discomfort in our hearts. And in a sense, there's a whole vast spectrum of pleasure and pain, isn't there? We know that. I'm sure all of us in our little squares have had, you know, even this week, a bit of fun, a bit of happiness. I think Jamie said when he came on, he's had a good day, which was very nice to hear. But there's probably some of us that are thinking, well, actually, I haven't. It's been really rotten. Or actually, yeah, a bit of it was okay. But in another moment, I felt rotten, and I don't know why. So the worldly winds are just so strong, but we can't see them really. Wind is not really seen. It's how it moves things that we can see it. So we can only see it when it moves things and sometimes destroys things. It's then that we can sort of, you know, feel the effects of it. So the whole spectrum is like a huge bright rainbow. This was my vision. It's a huge bright rainbow of pleasure, but it's also splattered with greys and browns and mashed up muddied colours that present us with an image we may not want. So how do we work with that when it's out of our control? So we have this beautiful, bright, glowing rainbow, but actually someone's chucked a load of mud all over it, you know? How do we work with that? You know, how can you grab a rainbow? I've tried. When I was little, I used to go walking for quite some time. I never caught up with it. So when we wish for the brightness, we sometimes get a storm, you know? Or it may be that we're attached to the storm and we find the brightness unbearable. So how do we work with that? You know, the pleasure and pain of life and the whole spectrum of, you know, small minor things like I've run out of tea bags to great big things like being given a diagnosis that's unpleasant or falling out with a friend or anything really. It can be anything personal to us. I always think our mind is a bit like a magnet and it's drawn to so many things. I think we're like magpies in a way. It's often human nature to be curious and enchanted by things, drawn in, pulled in towards the things we want, things that we can't always afford, things we can't always get, but we're going to have a go. Things that are interesting and that will offer us pleasure, joy, and mainly distraction from everyday life. Craving pleasure has many forms, and I'm sure that you've all got your own. You know, even when you were young, there might have been a certain person that you craved for that scorned you. You know, holidays that we think, oh, if only I was on holiday, I've only got another 2 months and I've got to put up with my life for 2 months till I get that week's holiday. You know, I do that sometimes. Sometimes people think they can find pleasure in gambling, alcohol and drugs, and all other sorts of things. You know, we all do it. I find happiness sometimes in pizza, but actually afterwards I think, oh dear, I wish I hadn't have eaten all that, you know. So we all try and sort of find pleasure in different ways, and sometimes that pleasure is really great, but sometimes, you know, it can be a bit distorted as well, you know, what we think is pleasurable. We can also crave certainty, and particularly at this current situation in our life, and everlasting health. I mean, who doesn't want everlasting health? You know? I've never heard anyone say, I don't, you know, well, some people do say I don't care if I get ill, but I do. I'd like to have everlasting health, but I don't believe it. We're also often repelled by things we don't like, and that's things in our view that are not pleasant, things that may cause our friends harm as well, so people close to us. We don't want people close to us being harmed. We may have a judgment about something, and sometimes there's a lot of fear in that. And if we become all consumed by the negative, that can really change our moods, our life, our communication, and our choices that we make. Become consumed with too much pain, too much despondency, too much despair. If we take the world on and wear it, sometimes we can get a little bit crushed. So in a way, it's about sort of balance, I think. Yeah. There's a sort of push-pull of life as we are blown around by the worldly concerns. And often we can be attached to things in the past a lot as well, or the future. And I know sometimes when I talk to my mum, you know, she talks about the past an awful lot. And sometimes I say, well, what about the now? You know, we've got some nice cakes here and we're having a chat. But sometimes she sort of, yeah, she talks about the past a lot. So we can all do that. You know, the Buddha said in the Dhammapada, he abused me, he beat me, he harmed me. And we can kind of hold on to these things from the past. And so also the future, you know, we can be looking ahead and not really seeing where we are right now and trying to sort of sort it out of it in a sense. We can spend a lot of time worrying about pain or grasping onto pleasure as a quick fix. And greed and aversion are often under the radar. They're a bit sneaky, you know, when we're seeking these things, when we're seeking pleasure. We don't really think that we're being greedy or sort of grasping. And sometimes we're not, but if we really hold on to it tightly, then in a way there's something under that. There's something a bit more than just, you know, doing it. Vajragupta suggests, and I've got a copy of his book here, hang on. There it is. Vajragupta suggests in his book, Sailing the Worldly Winds, that dependence on worldly conditions for our happiness is a kind of passivity, especially the negative worldly winds. So if things don't go our way, some people have a tendency to victim mentality or blame. So if we don't get what we want, we don't get what we feel that we've earned or what we deserve, we can sort of get into a bit of either victim mentality where it's always happening to me, or blame, you know, it's your fault. All you there, it's your fault. You know, that's the way it is. It sort of takes the ease off us, I think, and saves us looking at ourselves. And when things do go our way, we begin to expect life to be just like that. We begin to rely on pleasurable experience as a given, and we take it for granted. So in a way, we can become passive and have a passive relationship to life about that as well. So when we experience unpleasant things, we can feel passive and think, well, that's just the way it is. You know, we're all going to die. We all deserve it. It's just what it is. And in a way, you know, if we have too positive an experience, we could be in for a small fall. You know, if it's like, well, I deserve this. I've earned this. Life is always going to be good. You know, they're sort of unrealistic views in a way. I'm sure that we don't live like that. I'm being a bit extreme, but I think sometimes we can tip a little bit. I often sit quietly when I'm experiencing these states, and I've asked myself, have these things come from my own mind, or have they come from past experience, what I've been told, shown, exposed to in my daily life? Advertising, what's in, what's cool, what's not, what's new, what's in vogue? And this can be from our clothes to our gardens, to our choice of car, partner, or even our spiritual path. You know, things can come in and out. And we can just think, oh, you know, that's going to give us pleasure. I'll follow that for a bit. Or that's the new look. I'll grab that for a bit, you know, ride on the back of that time swan. And there's nothing wrong with preference or wanting to improve things or upgrade anything. There's nothing wrong with having a fun time. I'm fun all the way. Just, you know, big up the fun and be a Dharma practitioner and have fun. So that's really important. And there's nothing wrong with wanting all beings to have liberty, equality, and peace. Really nothing wrong with that. History has come from wanting improvement, creating change, speaking on behalf of humanity and the planet. And this enables us to grow. And this is the way of the Dharma warrior. But it's when we over-invest in these beliefs and these wantings, wanting things to go our way, wanting to mend things, wanting to solve things, attaching to pleasurable experience and attaching to negative experience, you know, it's the holding on that actually is just going to sort of bring us down in the end. Sometimes wanting pleasure is a bit like sort of steering the ship on a sea of gold. And we're just like, wow, this is amazing, you know, and then we hit an iceberg. So the question really is, what do we do then? What do we do then? You can't tell me because you're all muted. Sometimes we can become angry, resentful, or just plain tired of life. We can become like a dog chasing his tail, trying to maintain good times and avoid dukkha. We can just kind of keep sort of trying to keep going and keep everything good because, you know, dukkha doesn't affect us, but actually it does. And, you know, at the moment in this current climate, there's a lot of stuff going on, but there always has been, you know, even in the Buddha's day, there was big stuff going down. So, you know, how do we work with that? But how do we also stay alive to what's happening around us? Not just shutting it down and thinking, well, you know, that doesn't concern me. Everything concerns us, but grasping on and holding on is not helpful. The same if we spend our life avoiding or denying pain. And your pain and mine could be completely different. You know, I might have pain that's completely different to the pain that you're experiencing at the moment, but it's all from the same cloth. It's all from the same cloth. Pain is pain. We experience pain in different ways, different levels, at different times. But it's all from the same cloth. So we're in it together. We're in it together. There's a whole spectrum of pain, emotional, mind, physical, and encountering other people's pain and suffering as well, which can affect me, you know, and animals particularly. When I see things, it affects me. It causes me pain to see what's going on. Awareness of the planet and its inhabitants at risk. And I'm sure we've all experienced this at some point in our lives when we've seen something and felt helpless or despondent. I'm sure everyone here this evening has experienced it, and everything's going swimmingly and we receive a phone call and it tells us that our loved one is ill, or our bank balance is overdrawn, or we're sick and we're experiencing fear and isolation and discomfort. How do we work with that when the worldly winds are blowing around us, battering at our door? As Dharma practitioners, how do we work with that? That's something for your groups, maybe. I'm often drawn to the image of Milarepa, a much respected Tibetan Dharma guru, sitting in his cave whilst the powerful winds of destruction rip and blow all around the cave, ripping trees and everything in its path, smashing everything to the ground. And I always think of Milarepa sitting calmly in deep concentration, unaffected by the disturbance, seeing all conditioned things as they really are, impermanent, insubstantial, unsatisfactory. So he's not denying they're not blowing around, he's not hiding from them, but he is in the moment. He's very present, and he sees things. He sees things as they are. And I find that vision very inspiring. So in a way, we've all got our own vision, and we are our own vision. We are our own vision. So yeah, what would you do? You know. I think lastly, another thing to remember is that other people's pleasure can be other people's pain. Because sometimes you think, well, I'm having a really, really good time. And the person in the corner might be sitting there thinking, I'm having a really horrible time. But we're sort of there having a great time, and it doesn't really matter. So I think, yeah, other people's pleasure can be other people's pain. Not just our pain. It's not just our pain or my pleasure. Recently, around where I live, there's been quite a few alcohol-fueled parties going down outside, and people having a great time. But some other people in the neighbourhood haven't been having a great time. It's been causing them a lot of pain, a lot of upset. And the same with the local farmer, who's really grumpy because people are walking the dogs, which is a lovely thing to do. But they're sort of running riot around the sheep. And people are having a few social gatherings in that field and leaving lots and lots of trash. So in a way, their pleasure is causing harm to others. And so sometimes I think, you know, are our pleasures causing harm to others? What we buy, what we consume, how we speak to people. You can't be walking around like that all the time, because you never get out of your cave, you know, you just be like, oh. But it's worth thinking, you know, how am I affecting others? So in a way, we're just seeing how we can be totally unaware of the pain that we can cause, and we can become helpful citizens for others as well as ourselves. So it's not just our pleasure and pain, or my pleasure and pain. I want pleasure, you know, it's all of us. We're all interconnected. And also I was thinking about some people and how they can be attached to painful experiences. So we talk about people wanting and craving pleasure and pushing away and being averse to pain. But sometimes I think people can also be attached to pain. And, you know, some of you may get that, and others might be thinking, what the hell does that mean? But, you know, sometimes past experiences, people can feel very, sort of, yeah, very attached to them. And we all do sometimes, you know. We can work with that, and we can look at that, and we can share it, and we can do all sorts of things. So that's up for you to discuss, really. You know, when we're having bad times, how do we sort of get through those? How do we work with those? And how do we let go a little bit? You know, because I think from my past, I used to have a right chip on my shoulder, saying I had a really rotten life. I had a rotten life. But I'm sure loads of people have, thousands of people have. And the more I can sort of respond to others, the more I could sort of melt away that sort of rigidity of pain, and just think, gosh, everyone's having a bit of pain. You know, everybody. It's a good place for metta in a way. Good place for metta and mindfulness, to be aware of others, you know, others' pleasure and pain as well. So there's value in having awareness of that, and working with it as best as we are able. And there's many different ways. You know, the Dharma being hugely, for me, one of those things, but there's many different ways. In the words of Milarepa, craving causes misery, while worldly deeds bring pain. With this in mind, one feels sorrowful. Thinking thus, one searches for a cure. Heed the bounty of your Guru, and avoid all sinful deeds, casting worldly things aside. Stay firm in your practice. Keep your good vows and devote your life to meditation. If you can hear snoring, that's Gertie the pug, because I can. And I was thinking of pleasure and pain even with my dog. You know, she's my princess. She can do no wrong. I've got lots of false views. She's perfect. But when she snores, probably about 18 hours a day, it makes me really grumpy sometimes. Don't tell her, don't tell her. And yeah, and sometimes she sniffs bins a lot as well. So we're going for a walk and she'll just stop and sniff a bin, and then she'll sniff another one and another one. And I can feel quite agitated, even though I love my dog to pieces. Sometimes, especially this morning when it was raining and she was sniffing probably the 5th bin, I was thinking, you dirty little thing, come on. So even the pleasurable things can have sort of, you know, elements, flickers of pain. Yeah, even Gertie the pug. So I'm going to just finish with a couple of questions, and we don't have to use these in the groups. We can just, you know, talk about our own experiences, or we might not want to, you know. We can listen. But, yeah, whatever it is that you want to do, really. But I was thinking, are we attached to pleasure-seeking or painful experiences? Do we have a tendency to go one way or the other? Or do we go both ways, but we do get quite attached sometimes, you know, like sort of he abused me, he beat me, or somebody in the shop may have sort of leaned over you, and we're in the middle of a COVID-19 crisis, and instantly your peaceful, calm sort of demeanour suddenly goes, you know, we're supposed to be social distancing here. And so, you know, are we sort of attached to pleasure or painful experiences, and can we let those things go? You know, when we have a lot of pleasure, that we meet the person of our dreams, or, you know, can we let things go a little bit? Or when we're in pain, when we're suffering, when we have illness, or when people wind us up, or we wind ourselves up more like, I think that's our own mental states in a way. We chuck those second arrows and put some paraffin on the flames. You know, are we good at letting go? Or are we getting there? Or are we still holding on? How do we work with those situations? How do we work with those situations? How does the Dharma help us? You know, what aspects of the Dharma help us with those situations when we're sort of bouncing up and down, thinking, I'm really cross, I'm really angry, how am I going to let this go? You know, how does the Dharma help us? Or maybe the Dharma doesn't help us, and don't feel ashamed not to share that. You know, it might be that you go for refuge to something else. So, you know, share whatever you want. Share whatever you want. And what helps us to catch that moment, that essential moment when we're being blown around and caught up and whipped up in the winds of pain and pleasure, when we're really quite sort of tight by them? What sort of, you know, what helps us to catch those moments? You know, brings awareness to it and thinks, I can see something happening here. I can do something about it. Because choice gives us action, doesn't it? Choice gives us action. And awareness brings choice. So what helps us and what doesn't? And if you've cracked it and you don't feel pain, please share it. We'll put you on the big screen. It'd be amazing. But I think, you know, it can be anything from treading on a drawing pin to, yeah, losing someone that we deeply love. Or, you know, anything that brings us fear and stuff like that. Okay, so there's 3 kind of questions. Are we attached to pleasure-seeking or painful experience? How do we work with those situations? And what helps to catch that moment when we're being blown around and caught up in it? And that's really essential for me. That'd be my thing, I think. So I'll pass you back to Vajrapriya, who is going to magically split us into groups, maybe not. And then we'll come back